This anomaly presents no discernible threat to our current operational parameters.
They're all gone. It's all lost. What have I done?
Let the official record show, Mission 27 Gamma was an unmitigated disaster. A cosmic pratfall. A galactic level, hold my fermented nutrient paste and watch this moment. I am lead researcher Kalen, and if anyone in the Concordat archives is listening to this, I implore you to learn from my spectacular, universe-endingly embarrassing mistake. The mission was simple. Pop over to some forgotten mudball in Sector 7G, grab a local primate, poke it a bit, and drop it back off before it even realized its primitive little brain had been borrowed. They called themselves humans. What could possibly go wrong? I'd asked. The universe, it seems, has a wonderfully cruel sense of humor. We were not prepared. We thought we were observing a lab culture in a petri dish. We ended up tapping on the glass of an apex predator's terrarium. And we got what we deserved. It all began, as most debacles do, with a meeting born of supreme overconfidence. 3 cycles ago, I stood in the briefing chamber of the Stardust Drifter, trying my best to project an aura of academic dignity while my team did their best to undermine it. A shimmering hologram of Earth, that gaudy blue and green marble, spun lazily in the room's center. Right then, I began addressing my esteemed colleagues. Earth, a charmingly chaotic little planet inhabited by a peculiar species of bipedal primates who have, against all odds, managed to not extinguish themselves yet. Nylin, our security officer, cracked the knuckles of her upper 2 hands. The sound was like granite slabs grinding together, a noise she made when she was bored and fantasizing about hitting things. They look soft, Kalen, she grunted, her massive form casting a shadow over the hologram of a human male. Look at it. No carapace, no visible weaponry. Its vital organs are just sitting there, behind a thin layer of skin. It's practically an invitation. Yes, Nylin, thank you for that insightful tactical analysis, I said, my voice dripping with the kind of patience one reserves for particularly slow-witted pack animals. The idea is to study it, not to see if it pops when you squeeze it. From the other side of the room, Zor, our biologist, was practically drooling. He poked a spindly digit through the hologram, looking utterly fascinated. And their skeletal structure is internal. Can you imagine? It's completely backwards. They build their bodies like a poorly designed building with all the support beams on the inside. Truly, it's a miracle they don't just fall apart in a strong wind. My protege, Alara, watched all of this with the wide-eyed reverence only the young and inexperienced can muster. Their technology is so primitive, lead researcher, she chirped from the pilot's console. I've analyzed their global communications. It's 90% advertisements for processed food and videos of their pets falling off furniture. We could land on their most sacred monument, and they'd probably try to sell us in trance. I couldn't help but sigh. This was my team. A trigger-happy brute, a biologist who treated his subjects like fascinatingly gross mold, and a pilot whose optimism was rivaled only by her naivete. The mission, I said, raising my voice to cut through the impending foolishness, is insultingly simple. We are on a collection run, a quick trip to the Galactic Petting Zoo. We find a lone specimen, put it to sleep with the paralysis beam. Level 2 should be more than enough to handle these flailing creatures and bring it aboard. We run our scans, wipe the memory of its little alien holiday, and return it to its puddle of mud. It won't remember a thing, but their broadcasts show them to be quite violent, Neil impressed, clearly disappointed at the lack of a promised fight. Lots of explosions and theatrical shouting. I actually laughed. A dry academic chuckle. Nylin, that's called entertainment. Fictional scenarios designed to stimulate their underdeveloped cerebral cortexes. The real things are docile. Our data shows that when faced with superior technology, they either faint or begin worshiping it. Either response is acceptable. I gestured grandly at the hologram. Honestly, the most challenging part of this entire mission will likely be enduring the paperwork afterward. Now let's go find ourselves a human. The Stardust Drifter settled into a geosynchronous orbit over the largest green smear on the planet, utterly invisible, of course. Below us, nearly 8 billion human minds were busy worrying about things like the economy and whether their favorite sports franchise would win the big game. The sheer, overwhelming banality of it all was staggering. It felt to me naturally to sift through this mountain of mediocrity to find one perfectly average pebble. Elara, initiate the search parameters, I commanded. I am Roger, I commanded, leaning back in my command chair with a sigh. It was time for the tedious part. Parameters confirmed, lead researcher, she chirped. Filtering now. On the main holoscreen, the globe of the Earth was inundated with a crimson wave, signifying exclusion zones. The process was, in its own way, a masterpiece of efficient condescension. First, we filtered out the 99% of the population clustered in the noisy, polluted concrete hives they called cities. Then we scrubbed anyone with a registered military or government affiliation, not because they posed a threat, heavens no, but because their behavioral patterns are so tediously aggressive and predictable. Finally, we set the primary parameter, chronic isolation. We wanted someone whose brief, unannounced departure wouldn't cause a ripple in their primitive social pond. The crimson wave receded, leaving only a few thousand scattered green dots across the planet's surface. Refining search to the Amazonian sector, I instructed, stifling a yawn. Cross-reference for 0 recent electronic communication. The dots blinked out one by one until a single solitary beacon pulsed steadily in the heart of the rainforest. The system chimed, a polite little sound for such a momentous occasion. We have our specimen, Elara announced, her voice filled with a sense of accomplishment that was frankly adorable. She brought his profile up on the main screen. Name, Lucas Randall. Age, approx 38, Terran cycles. Occupation, naturalist. A charmingly vague term that usually means unemployed and fond of trees. Apparently, he'd authored a few self-published digital pamphlets on Amazonian fungi, which I'm sure were riveting reads. Status, solitary. Off-grid for over 5 years. No government affiliations, no corporate trail. Perfect. Nylon leaned in, her 4 eyes squinting at the image of the man, a decidedly average-looking creature with unremarkable brown fur on his head. He doesn't look like much, she grumbled, clearly still hoping for something that might at least require her to switch her weapon from stun to mildly inconvenience. He isn't supposed to look like much, Nylon, I explained, as if to a child. He is the baseline, the control group, the very definition of unremarkable. Lead researcher, Elara interjected, her brow furrowed in concentration. There's a small flag here, a minor anomaly. I waved a dismissive manipulator. What is it, Elara? Did we discover he has an unusual fondness for a particular type of moss? No, sir, she said, looking puzzled. It's his baseline neural activity. Our passive scans show a deviation of 7.6% above the norm for his demographic. And the complexity of the synaptic patterns, they're remarkably efficient. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the silence hang in the air before breaking it with a condescending chuckle. Elara, my dear, I said slowly, savoring the teachable moment. A 7.3% deviation in a species that thinks digital watches are a neat idea is what we in the advanced scientific community call statistical noise. It means this particular protozoan is slightly better at thinking than the rest of the pond scum. Perhaps he can count to 11. It is irrelevant. I turned to the rest of the team. He is, for all intents and purposes, the perfect, boring, isolated specimen our models predicted. Nylon grunted. Deep in the jungle. No witnesses. I like it. Clean. Exactly, I said with a flourish. No fuss. Elara, lock his coordinates. We'll descend to low atmosphere. Zor, prepare containment, chamber 3. Try not to get it dirty before the subject arrives. And Nylon, I added, fixing her with a stern gaze. Please try not to break our new toy before we've had a chance to play with it. A smug sense of satisfaction settled over me. And just like that, the most difficult part of the day was over. All that was left was the simple, mundane task of abduction. The abduction itself was insultingly simple. We located our target, Lucas Randall, beside a riverbank in the Amazon, seemingly engrossed by a piece of foliage like a newly spawned grub. One silent azure beam later, he was frozen mid-gaze and lifted aboard. The entire process, from atmospheric entry to him being deposited on the examination platform in Chamber 3, took less than 2 minutes. It was flawless, efficient, and profoundly boring. Well, that was a monumental waste of my combat training, Nylin groused, slumping against a wall. I ignored her, moving to the observation window. The chamber was a sterile white box, its systems humming away, maintaining a perfect Earth-normal environment. We watched, waiting for the paralysis field to dissipate. I had my standard soothing, do not be alarmed primitive creature speech queued up, ready to calm the inevitable screaming fit. The azure glow around Lucas faded. He slumped for a moment, and Zor leaned forward in anticipation. Then he blinked. He didn't scream. He didn't faint. He didn't even gasp. He sat up slowly and rolled his shoulders as if shaking off a long nap. Then he stood, stretched his arms above his head with a soft grunt, and cracked his neck. The sound echoed in the silent observation room, a sharp, deliberate retort to our expectations. He took a calm, measured look around the featureless white room, his eyes lingering for a moment on the faint hum of the atmospheric regulators. His gaze was not one of fear, but of appraisal. He walked directly to the observation window, a perfect, seamless mirror from his side. He stared at his own reflection for a few seconds, a faint, unreadable smile playing on his lips. It was time. I activated the communication system. Human specimen, do not be alarmed. You have been temporarily brought aboard a... Let me stop you right there. The voice, calm and clear, cut through my prepared speech like a scalpel. I physically recoiled. The team froze. Lucas hadn't even turned around. He was still addressing his own reflection in the mirror. Before we get into the whole, we come in peace, you will not be harmed part of the program, he continued, his tone impossibly conversational. I have a quick question for you. The atmospheric composition in here, it's a perfect nitrogen-oxygen blend, trace argon, CO2 scrubbed to near zero. Very impressive. But the ambient pressure is about 3% higher than at my elevation down there. Was that a deliberate choice to increase oxygen absorption and reduce fatigue? Or just a rounding error in your conversion from whatever ridiculous measurement system you use? Silence, absolute, dumbfounded silence. In the observation room, Alara's mandibles hung agape. Zor was frantically checking his life support console as if it had personally betrayed him. Nylin had pushed herself off the wall and was staring at the window with a look of utter disbelief. The specimen wasn't panicking. The specimen was auditing our environmental systems. I scrambled to recover my composure, my primary heart hammering against my ribs. Your awareness is noted. You are here for scientific study? Or a scouting mission? He scoffed, finally turning from the mirror to pace the length of the chamber. Let's be honest. You wouldn't use a vessel this over-engineered for a simple sample run. The energy signature from your drive core is ridiculously overpowered for a ship this size. The hull plating shows micro fissures consistent with repeated atmospheric entries, so you do this often. And you, he said, pointing a finger vaguely in my direction behind the one-way glass, you're the one in charge. Your voice has that insufferable ring of academic authority that just oozes, I'm smarter than everyone else here. He then gestured to his right, and somewhere over there is the muscle. The heavy, probably complaining about how easy this was. Nylin let out an involuntary low growl. He gestured to his left, and over there is the real science nerd, the one who's just itching to get me on that table and see what makes my primitive biology tick. Zor flinched as if struck. He stopped pacing and stood in the center of the room, a predator who had just finished mapping out his cage. How could I possibly know? You're all standing in the optimal positions for observing a central platform. It's basic operational procedure. The question isn't how I know. The question is, why didn't you know that I would know? I was horrified. This wasn't an interrogation. This was a hostile corporate takeover, and my entire team had just been made redundant. You will answer our questions, I snarled, my authority disintegrating. Lucas just smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who had been holding all the cards from the moment he woke up. No, I don't think I will, he said pleasantly. But since you brought me all the way up here, it seems only fair you answer one of mine. Let's start with your ship's name. You seem like the kind of species that would name it something dreadfully pompous and self-important, like Stardust Drifter or Herald of the Void. How close am I? The chamber fell into a silence so profound I could hear the panicked thrumming of all four of my hearts. The silence that followed his question was a physical thing. It pressed in on us, heavy and suffocating. He knew the ship's name, or a name so close it was functionally identical. It was a guess, a lucky shot, it had to be. To believe otherwise was to accept that our entire paradigm of this species was not just wrong, but laughably inadequate. Irrelevant, I finally snapped, turning away from the observation window. I refused to engage with the creature on its own terms. He's posturing, a primitive psychological tactic. Elara, yes, lead researcher? She stammered, her gaze still locked on the calm figure in the chamber. I want a full data composite. Now, I commanded, my voice a low, dangerous hiss. Forget the surface-level indexes. Break through to their raw data networks. I want to know what this Lucas Randall ate for breakfast 10 years ago. I want to know the title of every digital file he's ever downloaded. I want to know his dental records. Find something that explains this. Now! My team, jolted out of their stupor by the venom in my voice, scrambled into action. Elara's manipulators flew across the holographic console, her confident grace replaced with frantic urgency. Data streams, messy and chaotic in that uniquely human way, flooded the screen. It was like sorting through a galactic garbage heap. Sir, I'm getting past his public profile, Elara reported, her voice tight with strain. There are layers, firewalls, old, but they're surprisingly complex. It's like he built a digital fortress around a simple wooden hut. Then tear it down, I roared. For several minutes, the only sounds were the frantic tapping of the console and the steady, calm breathing of the man in the cage. He just stood there, watching the mirror, a picture of serene patience, as if he knew exactly what we were doing and was simply waiting for us to catch up. I'm through, Elara gasped. I've accessed a fragmented, encrypted server linked to a defunct government agency. On the screen, the placid profile of the harmless naturalist flickered. It was replaced by a string of text that made the air in the room grow cold. File status declassified, level 7 clearance, eyes-only primary skill set, cryptanalysis, strategic deception, psychological warfare, offensive-defensive, red team operations. Last known affiliation, agency name redacted, Directorate of Cognitive Security. The words hung in the air, each one a death knell to our mission. Zor's biological curiosity had curdled into raw fear. He was no longer looking at an interesting animal, but at a venomous snake. Nyland's desire for a physical confrontation had evaporated, replaced by the deep, instinctual unease of a predator facing something that doesn't play by the known rules of combat. And I felt the floor of my reality give way, the 7.3% deviation. The statistical noise I had so arrogantly, so condescendingly dismissed. It wasn't noise. It was the signal. It was the only thing that mattered. We didn't capture a hermit, I whispered, the horrifying realization crashing down on me. We captured a ghost, a professional ghost who built a life so boring, so isolated, that it would be irresistible to any external reconnaissance. My gaze shot back to the window. He didn't just stumble into our path, he planned it. He wanted us to take him. As if sensing the shift in our panic, Nyland made her decision. That's enough, she snarled, her brute force instincts taking over. I'm going in there and putting this thing to sleep for good. Do it, I shrieked, all pretense of scientific purity gone. Sedate him, level 10. I don't care if it scrambles his brain into soup. As Nyland strode towards the containment chamber door, weapon raised, Lucas spoke again. His voice was still infuriatingly calm, but it cut through the chaos like a shard of ice. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Nyland. She froze mid-stride. We all did. How do you know my name? She breathed. A small smile touched Lucas's lips. You all have comms implants, right? Forgive me if I'm wrong. They emit a low-level energy signature. It's faint, but easy to pick up if you know what you're listening for. Yours is spiky, aggressive. Kalen's, he nodded in my direction, is tightly controlled, a real wall of arrogance. Zor's is jittery, and Elara's is just bright and clear. You broadcast your personalities like a flashing neon sign. He had been reading us. On a level we didn't even know we were transmitting. He was seeing us more clearly through a one-way mirror than we could see him in a sterile, fully lit box. But that's not the real reason you shouldn't come in here, he said, his voice dropping slightly. The real reason is that it's too late. Too late for what, human? I spat, my fear manifesting as rage. You were so proud of your paralysis beam, he explained patiently, as if talking to a slow child. A sophisticated piece of biotech. It floods the subject's nervous system with targeted energy pulses to disrupt motor control. It's quite brilliant, really. But here's the thing about a two-way street. Traffic flows in both directions. Any energy beam that can carry instructions in can also carry data out. He tapped his temple with a single finger. While your beam was telling my nerves to shut up, my brain was telling your beam a story. A very short story encoded in a simple binary dialect, piggybacking on the feedback loop of your own system. My four hearts seemed to stop all at once. The implications were unthinkable. What story? I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. What did you send? Lucas's smile widened, and for the first time it reached his eyes. They were filled with the cold, triumphant fire. Oh, nothing much, he said. Just a little message. A simple hello. Think of it as ringing a digital doorbell. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the suffocating silence. And I have a feeling someone is about to answer. The silence in the observation room was no longer one of mere shock. It was the dead, heavy silence of a tomb. My mind, a place usually filled with the clear, cool logic of data and probabilities, was now a maelstrom of raw, primal fear. Someone is about to answer. The words echoed, mocking the very foundations of my understanding. Answer who? I finally managed to scoff, a pathetic attempt to reclaim a shred of authority. Your species struggles to send intelligible messages across its own planet. You think you've managed to call for help from the stars? From inside his cage, Lucas just smiled. Who said anything about help? And then it happened. A klaxon, loud and jarring, blared through the ship. The serene white lights of the laboratory died, instantly replaced by the pulsing, angry red of a full system alert. Sir! Alara shrieked, her manipulators flying across a console that was no longer responding to her. I'm losing system control! There's an external command packet overriding my authority. It's not a hack, sir. It's using a priority handshake protocol. It has an administrative key. Impossible, I roared, but my voice was lost in the cacophony. No outside source could have our command keys. With a heavy hiss followed by the solid thump of magnetic locks engaging, the blast door to the observation room slammed shut. We were trapped. The four of us, a lead researcher, a biologist, a pilot, and a security officer, were now prisoners on our own vessel. The main holoscreen flickered, and the star charts vanished. For a moment, it showed the calm, smiling face of Lucas, viewed from the camera inside his own cell. Then his voice, no longer coming from the chamber's small speaker, but from the ship-wide communication system, filled the room. It was calm, steady, and utterly dominant. Your systems are powerful, Kalen, his voice boomed, but they are predictable. Your security is like a fortress wall, thick, formidable, and designed entirely to protect from the outside. You never considered the possibility of a threat already walking through your front gate. He let that sink in. That story I told your paralysis beam wasn't a message sent out. It was a key sent in. A recursive cryptographic key that rode your own energy wave directly into your ship's core programming. It told your computer that a new administrator with supreme command priority had just come aboard. He hadn't hacked our ship. He had colonized it. What have you done? Zor stammered, backing away from the observation window as if Lucas could reach through the glass. I told you, I rang a doorbell, Lucas's voice continued, as the main screen switched to an external, real-time view of the Earth below. Now let's see who's home. At first, nothing looked different. The blue marble spun serenely. But then Alara gasped. Did I ask, pointing a trembling digit at her sensor display. Sir, long-range sensors they're screaming. Multiple high-energy signatures appearing from everywhere. They're not warping in, sir. They were already here. On the screen, we watched in abject horror as the impossible unfolded. A large asteroid we had cataloged in orbit around Earth's moon began to crack open, not like rock, but like a chrysalis of metal and ceramic. From within its shell, the massive, gleaming barrel of an energy cannon emerged, slowly turning to face us. A piece of orbital debris we dismissed as a defunct 21st century satellite unfurled like a mechanical flower, revealing an array of missile pods in a shimmering stealth field. Then another signature appeared, and another, and another. from the dark side of Mars, from camouflage positions within the asteroid belt, from the frozen, silent depths of the Kuiper Belt. Dozens, then hundreds of hidden objects powered up, their energy signatures lighting up our sensor board like a supernova. This wasn't a primitive defense grid. This was a sophisticated, deeply entrenched, system-wide web of automated death. Nyalin, who had faced down pirate fleets in stellar megafauna without flinching, simply stared, her jaw slack. For the first time in her life, she was looking at a force she knew with absolute certainty she could not fight. Humanity has had visitors before, Lucas explained, his voice now cold as the void. Some weren't as polite as you. They didn't always return what they took. So we learned, we adapted, we built. We hide our greatest strengths in plain sight, disguised as junk and rock, waiting for someone to come knocking. He paused. Welcome to the Aegis Belt, Kalen. The planetary shield you were too arrogant to ever look for. His voice lost all trace of its earlier conversational tone. It was now the voice of a judge delivering a final, absolute sentence. This is not a negotiation. Your ship's navigation has been reprogrammed. You will be sent to the edge of this solar system, and you will never return. This is a message for your Concordat. Earth is not a library of primitives for you to study. It is a designated quarantine zone under our protection. Any vessel entering our space without explicit permission will be considered hostile and will be dismantled for parts. The containment field in Chamber 3 dissolved with a soft hum. The door slid open. Lucas stepped out, no longer a specimen, no longer a prisoner. You came here looking for a sample of our weakness, he said, looking directly at the observation window, directly at me. Instead, you found proof of our strength. Now open this door. My manipulator, the same appendage that had signed off on countless research grants and commanded missions across the galaxy, felt impossibly heavy. Every fiber of my being, every tenet of my species' ingrained superiority screamed in protest. But there was no choice. The game was over. We had been outmaneuvered, outthought, and utterly, comprehensively defeated. With a tremor I could not conceal, I tapped the command sequence into my personal datapad. Override security protocols. Open the observation chamber door. The blast door hissed open with a sigh of finality. Lucas stood on the other side, framed by the doorway. He wasn't gloating. There was no triumphant smirk. His expression was one of cold, professional finality. He had completed his objective, and we were now merely a loose end to be tied up. He walked past us without a word, his presence filling the room with an unnerving authority. Nyalin, the proud warrior, could not meet his gaze. Her entire identity, built on a foundation of physical dominance, had been shattered by a creature half her size who had won a war without throwing a single punch. Zor was trembling, muttering about cognitive anomalies under his breath. Alara simply stared, her expression a mixture of terror and a strange, reluctant awe. Lucas barely glanced at us. He strode to a secondary navigation console, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface with a familiarity that was horrifying. As promised, his voice echoed from the ship's speakers one last time. A one-way trip. Your navigation is locked. Do not attempt to alter the course. The Aegis is watching. A soft thud vibrated through the halls, small craft one of our own standard escape pods detached from the docking bay. His ride home. A moment later, the Stardust Drifter's main drive core roared to life with a violence that threw us against the bulkheads. The acceleration was crushing, pinning us in place. We were no longer a crew, we were cargo. We were trespassers being unceremoniously thrown out of a backyard we never knew was fenced. On the main screen, the blue marble of Earth, now flanked by the silent, watchful sentinels of its hidden fleet, shrank with terrifying speed until it was just another star in the indifferent void. The long journey back to Concordat Central was one of deep, suffocating shame. The four of us who had left with such smug certainty now occupied the same space in total silence, each lost in our own private abyss of failure. I spent the time compiling my report. It was the most difficult, most humiliating document I had ever produced. The grand chamber of the Science Council was packed. Beings from 100 different worlds watched me, their myriad eyes filled with judgment and disbelief as I stood before them, a diminished figure. I did not make excuses. I presented the truth in all its brutal clarity. I showed them the initial profile of the harmless naturalist. Then I showed them the real one. I played the audio logs of the encounter. Lucas's calm dissection of our atmospheric controls, his unnervingly accurate profiling of my team, his final chilling revelation. But the last piece of evidence was the one that silenced the chamber. I played the footage from the ship's external sensors. I showed them the asteroid cracking open. I showed them the debris unfurling into weapons of war. I showed them the Aegis belt powering up, a phantom fleet materializing from the darkness. A wave of murmurs, clicks, chitters, and subsonic hums rippled through the assembled counselors. Admiral Vorl, a being of crystalline logic and immense authority, leaned forward. "And you are certain this network was entirely concealed, lead researcher?" "Completely," I replied, my voice hoarse. "We surveyed the system for months. What we saw was precisely what they wanted us to see." I took a deep breath and gave my final solemn recommendation. I formally moved that Earth and its entire solar system be reclassified, not as a pre-warp society to be observed, but as a territory to be avoided at all costs. We do not know the full extent of their capabilities, their history, or their intentions. We only know that we were toys to them. The scene in the chamber faded as I concluded my testimony. My task was done. Back in my private quarters, the same room where I had begun this whole ordeal, I picked up my datapad one last time. I found the log I had started in a state of panic so many cycles ago and spoke the final words, bringing the loop to its terrible close. "And I fear we have just given them a reason to look out into the stars with anger in their hearts." I ended the recording. The mission was over. A notification chimed on the main console, a galactic-wide alert issued by the Concordat High Command. On every star chart, on every navigation screen from the core worlds to the outer rim, a new symbol had been placed over the pale yellow star that was Earth's sun. It was a stark, crimson icon, a coiled serpent, silent and waiting. The official designation was simple, and it sent a chill through what was left of my pride. System designation Sol. Status quarantine. Do not engage. Threat analysis unknown. Assume hostile.